Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to make this video to talk about something that is very common in the Bujinkan. This is a topic that has existed for probably the majority of the Bujinkan's lifespan, and it is the Tenchijin or the Tenchijin Ryaku no Maki. So what that is, for those of you that maybe are new to the Bujinkan or you're just kind of checking out what it is we are, the Tenchijin, ten meaning heaven or heavenly, chi meaning earth or earthly, and jin meaning man or human. And then the Ryakun Maki is like a strategies book. So you have the Tenchi Jin representing the Heaven, Earth, Man strategies book. And that book is actually comprised of those three individual sections: the 10 Ryakun Maki, the Heavenly Strategies book, the Chi-Ryaku Maki, the Earthly Strategies book, and the Jin-Ryaku Maki, the Manly Strategies book, or the Human Level Strategies book. And these were put together in the last maybe 30 years. Um, and there's a lot of confusion about it. But what I wanted to talk about was really, what is the Tenchijin, number one. Number two, why was it created? And number three, is it still applicable? And that's the question that gets raised here in this message. So let me just quickly paraphrase. Hi, Darren. Love the videos. They've been a great help. Thank you. I always appreciate the positive feedback. I like to know that my videos are actually helping you, so I appreciate that. Um, my question is about the Tenchijin. Back when I first started, this is all we ever trained on and all we ever talked about. Seems lately nobody's really talking about it anymore, and it seems the focus is now shifting to Ruha specific training and also things that other people are creating themselves. Anyway, he goes on to talk about basically a lot of creative licenses happening. People are starting to really train on a lot of different things, that's not necessarily part of the Tenchijin anymore, or they're really zeroing in on the Ruha themselves. Fortunately, this is a fantastic time to be in the Bujinkan because we have access to a lot of material we didn't have access to before. There are key individuals in the Bujinkan who are very qualified at being able to understand, uh, to be able to read and understand, and to be able to teach or communicate information in the Ruha, in the original Densho, which is that, I mean, that's really fantastic. And so that gives us aspects to our training that we didn't have access to before. And so this is a really good time to be in the Bujinkan. But again, the question comes up, what about the Tenchijin? So the Tenchijin, what it is a set of those three books, and it's broken up. Really, there's a logic to it. I know some people will say, the Tenchijin is just kind of a thrown together thing, but I see a logic to it, where the Ten Ryakunomaki, the first book, deals with kind of the framework of things, your movement, your structure, um, all of that sort of stuff is in that first book, and most of it comes from Gyokuru. There's a little bit of tweaks there, but most of it comes from Gyokuru, with some exception, like in the Kyu Kamae, there's 9 postures or Kamae, that several of those come from different Ruhas, Kotoru, the Kugishinru Kamae, etc. And even in the the Kianhapo itself is modified a little bit from what you would see in the Gyokuru, where you have things like Onikadaki and Genseki Nage and things like that, where those are not part of the Gyokuru Motogato or the Gyokuru version of the Kianhapo. And so just little tweaks like that. But really, it represents that framework of movement, postures, rolling, jumping, basics of, your basic foundational techniques, the sanshin, all that kind of stuff comes in the Ten Ryakunomaki. So that's like the frame. And then the Chi Ryakunomaki are individual skill sets broken up by category. So you have like the different gyakuwaza, the different reversal methods, the wrists, and how to do the arm locks and all that kind of stuff. Different methods of kicking, different types of breaking out, how to get out of holds and stuff like that. There's a handful of chokes. There's a whole list of nagewaza throws, all these different techniques that are broken up by category. And what's interesting on that is that, and I'll use the nagewaza for example, the throws, that a big chunk of those throws really are more judo type throws than what you actually see in the Ruha. And it's always interesting to take a look at that and why was that put in there. But I'll get to the why part in a minute. But the basic framework of that is you have this ten Ryaku Maki representing kind of the like I said, the frame of how things move. Then you have the Jin representing the I'm sorry, the Chi representing the individual little skill sets that are in there, and those plug into the frame. And then you have the Jin Ryaku. So the Jin Ryaku Maki are the actual kata that come from several of the Ruha of the Bujinkan. Now, only maybe about 3, 4, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I know it's only like 3 or 4 of the Ruha are represented in that. But you have them broken up again kind of by category. Uh, and those Ruha progress through. There's different situations, attacks from behind and stuff, attacks, people attacking you with weapons, etc. Um, and then it finally ends with this listing of techniques that come from Togakure that are all the escaping rat techniques or escaping techniques. And I find the logic to be interesting in the Tenchijin is that you have this beginning of the big movements, the frame, and then you have all the little individual techniques, and then you have the actual Ruha Kata, where you see all these bits and pieces kind of come into play. And then finally, the whole thing ends with the first introduction into ninjutsu, which is to escape. So you learn all these fighting skills, and then you finally enter the door of ninjutsu, where you're learning how to escape. And so that continues on from there. There's even an interesting point where why Genseki Nage was included in the Kion Happo. Why was that added in there as part of the Ten Rakunamaki? And some people say that the Genseki Nage is the gateway to the Nagewaza. So it's the first throw. That particular kata of the Kion Happo is the gateway to understanding the Nagewaza or the different throws. Things like how to take ukemi and how to create kazushi and all that kind of stuff. Um, so there's different kind of aspects to that. And arguments can be made for or against, or people have different ideas. But it is interesting to look at kind of the logic. Now, there's also rumors that say that um, that the Tenchijin was actually created because certain former Bujinkan senior teachers wanted to travel the world and be able to hold their own seminars and open their own schools, and they demanded to have some type of structural curriculum that they could use. And there's even stories that it's Hatsune Soke's wife that assisted in the creation of the Tenchijin. I don't know how true all that stuff is. I think definitely there was a lot of thought put into the Tenchijin. I don't believe it was just a thrown together book of random techniques. I think there was a lot of thought. I think that um, at that time, Hatsune Soke was traveling around doing these taikais in these different countries and having hundreds of people show up, and people were hungry for this art and they were training. Um, and so I think the Tenchijin kind of evolved. It originally, for those of us that have been around for a while, you might remember the Purple Book, Ninpo Taijutsu, that sort of stuff. Those are the predecessors. And then it finally became this Tenchijin, that it gave us something that was tangible that we could take to our dojos and our training groups and actually have material to train on. Um, and there's even some talk about people saying it's like giving us something to do while still preserving the Ruha, the lessons of the Ruha. So again, I don't know how true that is. These are just stories that come around from how this stuff started. But the Tenchijin really did set the stage for us as a Bujinkan global community to have a foundation of something to train on. What's interesting is there are no weapons in the Tenchijin other than some sections that deal with techniques against somebody using a weapon. But really, there's nothing in there about how to use a sword, how to use the bow, how to use any of that stuff. There's none of that's in there. So I think the logic in that is the idea that Hatsumi Soke at that time was really emphasizing the taijutsu, that it's your taijutsu that is the first focus, and then the weapon comes second. And uh, also, I think there was kind of a unwritten understanding that you would pursue those basics in addition to training in the Tenchijin. But that's that's a topic for another discussion. But I think it's interesting that none of the weapons were included in the Tenchijin, um, as far as just getting those basics. And even if people want to say, well, you don't have to worry about that. You just train in the taijutsu, and the weapon will fit. I understand, but there are very specific details that come with the use of weapons. There are very specific basics on how to hold a sword, how to move with the sword, how to cut with the sword, that just taijutsu alone is not going to teach that. You have to have that specific knowledge. The use of the bow, you have to understand how to hold it a certain way, how to be able to move with the body a certain way, that it's important that you're that you receive that specific training. So the fact that it didn't exist in the Tenchijin, I think, just goes to show you the limits of the Tenchijin. Um, that as a training tool, it's only designed to take you so far. But that's my opinion. A lot of schools use it as the basis for their ranking and their curriculum, and then they add in those weapon basics in addition to things from the Tenchijin. But the Tenchijin itself is very, very big. It's a lot of techniques, and for every motewaza you have urawaza. There's a lot to it, and if you go on the internet, you're going to see a lot of different variations of the Tenchijin. The original ones that were in Japanese, of course, those get interpreted into different languages, and those languages get interpreted into different languages. You have a lot of unclear instruction that people kind of fill in the blanks, and so a lot of different type of evolutions that happen with the Tenchijin and how it's being utilized and how it's being practiced. Um, but so the question becomes now, is it still relevant in today's training? And as I look around and I see what people are doing in their schools, um, I kind of feel like that the Tenchijin has kind of become this like a hybrid approach. Like it's a lot of people will still draw from it, they'll still train from it, but not as diligently. They're not pursuing the Tenchijin like it is the actual Densho of the Bujinkan, which is what a senior Daishihan told me once. How he views it is the Tenchijin is, and I believe it was Nagato's Daishihan that said this, um, that it was that the Tenchijin is the Densho of the Bujinkan. And I think for the most part, that's an interesting statement because it was created for us. But now that we have so much that's coming out, and especially now that you have individual soke for the Ruha, it's kind of interesting to see where this is going to play out. So, what is it that we should be doing? we have we have this model from the Tenchijin that we've used for a very, very long time. But now we have this big shift in focus towards Ruha and Ruha Kata. But now we have individual Soke for those Ruha. So, and we have the availability of certain individuals that are able to really teach to the level of understanding that we, our level of understanding of Ruha, I think, has really grown because of that. And should we be focusing on Tenchijin, or should we be focusing on Ruha, or should we be focusing on something else? Because there's also a growing segment of the Bujinkan that is really creating kind of their own hybrid approach to this art. They're implementing a lot of other different things into their training, or they're taking it purely on a conceptual basis and less on a technical basis. My opinion on that is I think the Tenchijin is still a very valid instrument for training. Do I think the Tenchijin should be exclusively trained on? Absolutely not. Do I think the Tenchijin should still be considered the Densho, the Bujinkan? I don't know if I agree with that entirely. I think maybe the Ten Ryaku and the Chi Ryaku are valid for a foundation of martial arts training, but the actual Ruha kata themselves that are in the Jin Ryaku and Maki, I don't think that matters as much because I think you can take any Ruha kata and do the same thing. It's if your frame is right and you have the skill sets that you've trained on, you can plug that into kata. Now, where my opinion on this is where I can see some issues here, is when you take different ruha kata and throw them together, because every ruha has its own basics. It has their own particular way of holding the body and moving the body, and there's a lot of deep elements that go into the kata from that ruha. Also, the progression of kata within a ruha. There's a logical progression in the way those ruha are, as far as how they put their kata in there. And if you're just cherry picking kata, then you're kind of missing that scaffolding. You're kind of missing that development that comes from that um, type of training where you train in the basics of the school, then you get to the first level of the kata and you train on the very first technique. And then when you reach a certain level, then you start to get introduced to the next technique and you can see the carryover into the next technique, the progression. When you're just cherry picking kata, then you miss that. And that's where it's like, okay, so I'm going to do this kata that requires this ruha's particular way of moving and particular way of holding the body, the structure, but I'm going to do it with this particular way of moving and this particular structure. I could be missing out on some stuff. So I think it becomes a very dangerous kind of approach to training. So on a basic level, yes, train on the Tenryaku, train on the Chiryaku, but even if you just train on those, I think really just developing a good body knowledge of balance, structure, and movement, and all of that, ukemi, how to strike, how to punch, kick, block, all that kind of stuff. Those basics, if you really focus on that, it becomes where the quality is more important than the quantity. It's not about learning 30 different kinds of throws. It becomes more about understanding how to take balance and how to change balance and how to topple somebody when they're in a position of weak balance. And that's just one example, but I think we can look past some of that a little bit. And when we get into the study of the Ruha, when we start to approach things from the aspect of weapons and armor and all that kind of stuff, I think I think it reconnects us back to the root of what it is we're doing, because the Tenchijin is not the root of what we're doing. The root of what we're doing is Hatsumi Soke. And the root of what we're doing is all of the Ruha that he has been given and his experiences training with his teacher, with Takamatsu Soke, and Takamatsu's teachers. That's the root. So I think if we pursue this art with the idea of learning to connect to that root or essence of what we're doing and not get so caught up on whether, is this Tenshijin, is this Gyokuru, is this Kotoru, I think we're going to be better. But again, I want to balance that with not having too much liberty in what you're doing, where it's not guided by any sort of solid structural plan or solid purpose. Um, and I know I'm kind of talking all around the place because this is really a difficult time right now as far as kind of seeing what should we be doing, where should we be going as martial artists, because this is a time of change right now in the Bujinkan. It's an exciting time, it's a scary time, but it's also kind of a time of fogginess. And especially with COVID and all these other things going on, there's a lot of kind of confusion right now. And yeah, you could say, well, just train on what makes you happy. But to me, that's a dangerous approach because I could train on all kinds of things that make me happy, but it's not going to take me anywhere. So you have to clearly understand what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and where it's going to take you. And if you understand that, then your training is going to make sense. So my suggestion to you is go ahead, use the Tenchijin, enjoy it. Study Ruha Kata with people who know what they're talking about. But always come back to the idea of where is this going to take me? Is it going to take me to a deeper understanding that's going to connect me to the other kata, to the next kata, the ruha? Is it going to connect me to the use of weapons? Is my punch going to be the same? The body dynamic going to match if I'm thrusting with a spear or a sword? Is the way I do my shito, is that going to match the way that I am swinging my kodachi or whatever, or throwing a shuriken? Does it connect you with that stuff? Is the way that I'm moving in this kata going to have elements that are the same 3, 4, 5 kata later? Are there little pieces that are going to still resemble that? Or am I doing a bunch of random kata? So that's kind of what I want to say about that. So the Tenchijin is still valid today, but I think we need to take a deeper look at the approach of what we're training on and why we're training on it. Back in the day, we were just excited to have something to train on, so we grabbed the Tenchijin and we clamored to it. But I think now we can be a little bit more grown up about this approach and start to say, okay, why am I training in this way? What am I doing? Where is it taking me? Is this where I want to go? And is it going to move me closer to the essence of this art? Or is it going to take me in a completely different direction? So I think that's probably the bigger kind of the more important questions that we need to be asking. So let the quality become more important than the quantity. And if you want to train for the Tenchijin, great, do it. But don't don't hang your hat on trying to memorize the Tenchijin because I think there's a much more significant lesson that can be learned um, that you can get from the training, regardless if it's Tenchijin or Ruha Kata or whatever. Um, so I hope this helps you understand some things a little bit. I again, I'm a little bit hesitant to share some things just because we are in a time of change and things are shifting. But I think it's important that we start to really look at these things. This is not the same Bujinkan as it was in the last few years, in the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And that's the beauty that things are always evolving and growing. And so the Tenshijin itself was a powerful tool at the time when we were given it, and it still continues to have value today, but even that's evolved. So we have to learn how to evolve with that and take responsibility for your training. So I hope you enjoy this. Hope you found it helpful in some way, at least maybe spur some thinking. Definitely drop me some comments. I love all the feedback. Throw me a message if you want. If there's anything you would like me to talk about in the future, let me know and I'll see if I can do it. But again, I appreciate all the support. And as I always say, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep training.